What happens when you give artists the freedom to create without the weight of financial uncertainty? In Otter Tail County, 4 local artists are finding out. Through a pilot program with Springboard for the Arts, they're using their work to spark a statewide conversation on guaranteed income and its power to support creators. See how art is driving change for the future of Minnesota. This is Up North Arts.
Production funding of Up North Arts is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community, member FDIC. Hug Hydronics, committed to making in-floor heating simple, providing in-floor heating solutions for both commercial and residential. More info at hughydronics.com. Closed captioning of Up North Arts is provided in part by Renaissance Hearing Center, committed to enhancing your hearing, allowing you to enjoy life's most important moments.
This project is called Artists Respond, People, Place, and Prosperity. It is a cohort of artists both in St. Paul and Otter Tail County who are doing projects to shed light on the impact of guaranteed income for artists. They are working on projects that help connect and engage their communities about the importance of supporting artists and valuing artists, but beyond that, questions of economic justice in our communities and prosperity, what it means to support our entire community's well-being. Springboard for the Arts is a community and economic development organization for artists, and our mission is to connect artists with the skills and services they need to make a living and a life, and to bring meaning and joy to communities through the arts. We got involved with the guaranteed income movement as a whole because we are interested in economic justice overall, but specifically as a way to learn what happens when you support artists at a level that doesn't have strings attached, where they have to do a project because of getting money, but really just supports who they are and what they bring to their community. Guaranteed income is an economic justice movement that is happening throughout our country. It's a larger movement that focuses on people of many backgrounds and supporting them with unrestricted cash payments that just kind of help them stay on their feet and stay ahead in life. Springboard has been piloting 2 different guaranteed income projects that specifically focus on artists in our communities. Part of the reason for that is that we believe that artists are essential in every community. However, artists really lack some of the social safety nets that other types of workers can access. We first piloted guaranteed income with 25 artists in the Frogtown neighborhood of St. Paul. That was a year-long project. We saw a lot of different impacts and very quickly knew that we wanted to pilot the same project in a rural context. So we are the first national pilot for guaranteed income for rural artists. And this program focuses on artists in Otter Tail County because we really serve the region surrounding Fergus Falls. What we did was we created a pool of artists that had taken our workshops or done a consultation with us or received emergency relief funding when the pandemic started. And we did a random drawing. This is a really important part of the guaranteed income kind of core principles, is that it is a non-competitive program. Artists especially are living in a system where they're constantly competing with each other, and we wanted to see what happens when there is support out there that you don't have to apply for. It just validates that you are an artist and your work is important, your existence in the community is important. There are 3 parts of this guaranteed income pilot. One is supporting those 25 artists with unrestricted cash for 18 months. A second part is following those artists as they participate in the program and doing research with our partners at the University of Pennsylvania to help inform larger policies about guaranteed income and help understand how it can make an impact, but also how these programs can really work in different places. And then the third part is this People, Place, and Prosperity cohort. People, Place, and Prosperity cohort is a group of artists both in St. Paul and Otter Tail County who are interested in this larger conversation about economic justice and support for artists. So these are artists that are really passionate about long-term support for artists, but they also have a particular interest in the economy and just general questions about community well-being and economic development. There are 4 artists based here in Otter Tail County that are participating in this year-long cohort where they're actually working alongside of each other, participating in regular cohort meetings where we have different guests come and talk about storytelling or guaranteed income itself. And then they've been invited to do projects that demonstrate and explore and engage the community about the impact of guaranteed income. Each of the artists are really taking a different approach to this storytelling, and that's really the point, is to have a lot of different mediums that the community can engage with. Candace, for example, is doing a painting project and kind of exploring the region's agricultural connections and how that relates to kind of our current economy and questions of kind of interdependence and community.
I started painting in 2019 and fell in love with it as an art form, as a way to tell stories differently. I live in the country with my wife and goats and chickens and a couple of dogs and a barn cat, and we've been in the area since 2017. So I'm working on a painting to try to capture the feelings of being a resident of a rural area, the positive aspects of being a rural resident, and trying to relate that to guaranteed basic income. So my idea is I'm making a painting of my 3 goats, hoping to tell the story about how in rural communities we really watch out for one another, we help each other, we tend to the herd is kind of the project title that I'm playing around with. I use acrylic paint mostly and latex paint, which is house paint. I do paint in oils, but this project I'm using acrylics. And I'm a mixed media painter, so I really like to integrate other elements as well into my painting. So there might be some fabric that I will sew into this painting, I'm not sure yet. I like the idea of like quilting into paintings and kind of mixing these different genres of handicraft with the more like serious art form of painting, to just kind of blur those lines and to really try to highlight and recognize the impact of women's labor in our visual field. So to me, quilts are fine art. I'm really invested in getting art to people that might not have as ready access to art spaces. So being the only member of the cohort who actually lives outside of Fergus Falls or one of the towns of our Otter Tail County communities, I take very seriously. Like, I want people to be able to encounter this art in places that aren't just the art gallery space. I am hopefully working with the directors of all of the libraries of Otter Tail County to try to get the painting to tour and to do some kind of artistic programming with each of the communities for those 4 library sites that exist. in rural areas, we are faced with the realities of a different economic situation because our tax base is lower in rural places because it's based on the number of people that live in a particular geography. And that's just one example of the ways that our economic situation really could be something that we need to better understand and find better support to address some of the rural inequities that are happening in the state of Minnesota and beyond. As a rural resident, I'm really passionate about that, and the urban places exist in relationship to our rural places. And as an artist, I think I have the ability to have a conversation about what rural means to me and open that up in a way that can maybe change hearts and minds to seeing the value in supporting people who are making their lives in rural places. I've experienced so many acts of kindness and neighborliness from my neighbors that I think we often see rural in a particular lens in our divisive and polarized times. And I'm trying to really uplift the positive aspects of rural to help demonstrate that infusing guaranteed basic income cash payments to our neighbors would enrich our community if we were able to have it go to anybody, artists included. Some people have never heard of it as a concept, and I think that it's something that is easily accomplishable through public policy, and I feel like in a rural area has such potential to make a positive impact. It's my hope that this painting can start the conversation and maybe lead to some advocacy in the future.
And then Jess Torgerson is doing a series of sculptures created in the Precious Plastics Lab in Fergus Falls, which is a lab where you can create original art out of plastic that is otherwise not recyclable. Her themes are really kind of around environment and shelter and safety.
We're building a crow. I think the base is garden pots. There's a music stand. We have a rake. We have some, I think it's industrial plastic wrap used in farming. We have placemats and garden fencing or snow fencing. So, and chicken wire. We've done projects before where we've used weaving. So we kind of weave in material. So we had some throwaway scrap felt that we used to give texture. 90% trash. Like, we pick it and bring it in. We have our supply pile over there that we can kind of pick from. If we have something in mind that we can't find in the trash, then we'll visit thrift stores. But, you know, we try to keep it all things that would be thrown away otherwise. Using, you know, found materials, they don't necessarily stick well together. So that's one of the only new things that we use as fasteners. So we use a lot of glue sticks, Gorilla Glue tape, we use zip ties, and whatever works. came across a Martin Luther King quote, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl, but just keep moving forward." And I think that's kind of, this is a physical version of that. Like, this is what we want in the end, is to be able to fly, but what we need to fly is support. And, creation is a messy process. It takes time and space, and it needs that. And I think, although the $500 a month isn't a lot, it does give an artist the space that they need, or can give them the space that they need to create. These are the beginnings of 60 birdhouses, which is also scrap that we obtained from Productive Alternatives. They had waste that they were just going to throw away, and we asked if we could have it, and they said, "We'll cut it to size for you, of course." So.
I tried to think of a time where people provide for something just in order to be around it. So I thought people put up birdhouses and bird feeders just so birds will come around them and can be in their presence, so they can see them and hear their songs and just experience them. And I thought that was a good analogy for artists and guaranteed income, and why we would provide for artists in our community.
And Tori Hanna is working on a fiber collage.
I spin yarn, I weave yarn, I knit yarn, I crochet yarn. If it's yarn, I play with it and do things with it. But one of the things that I've really started working with is copper wire. And I've been, over the last 40 years, using copper wire in my weavings and in my work. It's not real easy to work with. It doesn't have any bounce, so it breaks real easily, so you can't put a lot of tension on it if you're weaving with a loom. It's a little tricky to work with. You've all heard of trickle-down economy. And I know I'm an artist, but I spend a lot of time in politics and in climate change. Has been one of my hobby horses for many years. And so the project that I'm working on is going to be a bubble up economy project. And so what the guaranteed income does is it takes the money, instead of putting it all with the rich people up there and they hang on to it and a little bit trickle down once in a while maybe. And when I get that income, I pay rent, I buy groceries, I buy gas, I pay car fees, I pay insurance, I rent houses, I rent stores, but I can use that money to help subsidize what I want to do. And as soon as I buy a grocery item, then he pays a employee to pack the groceries and to carry them out, and then that employee takes that money and buys gas with it for his car so he can get to his job, and it helps everybody in the economy, and it is spent 10, 15, 20 times over. So I'm getting a bubble up economy, and so as bubbles, I kind of thought I will start working with round shapes. And so I'm using CDs, discs, for some of the background pieces, and I'm wrapping them in copper wire. I'm also using needle felting for the pictorial parts of the work. Larger embroidery hoops that I'm going to have wire and weaving in, and then they'll all be kind of put together in pieces, so they'll look like bubbles coming up. I think I'm going to do several smaller pieces that can be displayed together, or that can be put into one larger piece. It's been in the back of my mind for the last few months. I've been thinking about how I want to do this and what I want to do with it, and I finally got working on it. And so subconscious has been trickling down, bubbling up, I guess. And so I'm pretty sure I know where it's going, and it should come together fairly quickly now.
Sarai is a poet, and she's also a dancer. So she's doing a writing project and exploring really broad topics around spirituality and love, senses of well-being when it comes to money and family and relationships. Research is a huge part of this program. We wouldn't be doing it unless we were also really intentional about measuring and tracking the impact of guaranteed income. The Artists Respond cohort is one piece of that because that's kind of a more organic way to engage with the community and hear what locals really think and how they're reacting to this. But alongside of that, we have a partner, the University of Pennsylvania Center for Guaranteed Income Research. And so we have been working very closely with them. They've gotten to know many of the artists that are receiving the guaranteed income payments, and they are following those artists kind of from start to finish to really understand the different ways this is changing their lives or impacting the community as a whole. I think we're already learning that this is a really important new tool to support artists, and so we would love to expand this as much as we have the capacity to. However, we're also really interested in just helping other organizations or communities explore whether they could run a guaranteed income in their community. And so that's also just a big part of what Springboard does as a whole is we test and try things out and learn from them, and then we are always very open to sharing our processes. Our hope is that this could be something we can do long term. We do want to see what the research says, and we do need the funding to, over the years to make that possible. But we're also really in touch with different guaranteed income communities all throughout the country, and just really trying to be part of that bigger movement so that we're not doing it alone.
Artists are important. They are often the catalyst of change, and we live in a world that needs some change. We have a lot of problems, and I think no better people to start out the change than artists.
For artists, I think it's important for us to understand that art is so integral to the communities that we live in, and supporting artists helps create vibrant communities where we all can thrive. One of the things that I have always done is been a writer. And what drew me to painting was the ability to tell stories in a new way. I believe that narrative change is truly an entry point towards creating a more equitable world for all of us to live in. And being able to tell those stories and share those stories with new audiences really brings me a lot of joy.
Production costs for this program have been made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the members of Lakeland PBS.
So this was the very beginning stage of the painting, is this little graphite sketch. She's very elegant. She's all white. She's an alpine, wait, is that what she is? Alpine, and then in the summer we tell people not to park near the door because they like to stand on cars to get to the leaves on the trees right there.
He doesn't have his eyes yet.
He doesn't have his eyes, no. We've tried a couple different things and it doesn't, we aren't quite there yet. We just went to a dumpster and we looked around and we said what looks like it can make the body of a bird, the shape of a bird. So if you look under here, look down under here, see there's a bucket? It's like a bucket you would get a tree in if you bought a tree that you were gonna plant. So we stuck 2 buckets together to make the body shape, and we stuck it on an old hoe, like a hoe. I'm sorry.
Just because I'm working on a piece, it doesn't have to all be needle felting. I can also use weaving, knitting, crocheting. So I might actually crochet some rounds and knit some rounds to add to it. Because one of these things is it's growth. And so I like to do little plant types of figures, little leaves and shoots and flowers, and so I can embroider just about anything onto the base needle felting.